podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are You the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for this week's early news update. As we are playing on Tuesday, Regis Le Bris has had a press conference and has been chatting about a bunch of things. For once, it was a very, very interesting press conference. So we've convened to chat about that. Some other bits and pieces which are going on in the world of Sunderland, namely what Tony Mowbray had to say in the wake of the win over West Brom at the weekend, and some other little bits and pieces. Joining me, first off, we've got Johnny Hawley. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. How are you doing?
I'm very good, mate. Sun's still shining, so let's hope it's shining down on Carrow Road as Sunderland head there tomorrow. Also with us, making his second appearance and the first one for probably about 20-odd episodes, but it's only been a couple of weeks, is Ant Watson. Hello, mate.
How are you? You all right? I'm good.
I'm very, very good, mate. So let's start off with what Regis Le Bris had to say in his press conference ahead of the Norwich game. As I mentioned, loads went on. I think the big one from the top was the question around Romaine Mundle's hamstring injury. He said there's no timelines yet, as we're waiting to see a specialist. And when he was asked if he's worried about it being a season ender, he said, yes, it is possible. That really is a hammer blow to our hopes, isn't it, Johnny, when you think about, you know, we were planning for life with Romaine Mundle going into the playoffs, and all of a sudden it looks like we're not going to have him. I mean, I speculated when I spoke to Chris after the game on the reaction pod. We looked at it and thought, well, it doesn't look that bad, because he didn't. It wasn't like, it wasn't one of them where you can visibly see the hamstring go in the hand, hit the back, and the yelp in the air, and physios on the pitch for ages and being carried off, hobbled off. It seemed pretty, well, nondescript, if I'm being honest. You know, he just kind of felt it, walk off the pitch, no limping. But, I mean, we don't know what or how bad it actually is, but if we're talking about it being a season ender and the manager's not writing it off, that's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's even opened the door to the possibility of it being a season ender says to me that I think it more than likely is. I know that he likes to play his cards close to his chest and all that, but the fact it's the same hamstring that already went once this season for Mundle, I think is a really, really bad sign. So even if, let's say, he goes to a specialist and they say, right, well, you might have half a chance of being back on the grass in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I still think that the club are probably going to look at it and think, would he be useful for the playoffs? Of course he would. He's one of our best players. But would it be worth the risk of him having another setback, injuring it for a third time in the same season? At his age as well, with how much pace he's got and how athletic he is, I don't think you want to be risking it, really. I don't think you want to be messing about with an injury like that. So, yeah, even if it does end up not to be like, he's not going to have torn it off the bone or something, I don't think, because you're right, it didn't look that bad when he actually went down. But, yeah, I think, as I say, the fact that Le Bris, who's normally so, reserved with how much information he gives away, is all but confirming it, I think. Unfortunately, it's not a great sign. So, you can look at it as a chance for somebody else to step up, but big blow going into playoffs.
Yeah, it is a big blow, isn't it? And I mean, Romaine Mundle, as Martin said on the pod over the weekend, I think he brings something a lot different to pretty much anyone else we've got in terms of his athleticism, his working back defensively, the pace in which he gets across the pitch and gets shots away and things like that. We've got to find another option now, and it's, he did go into what we've got available. He was asked about Enzo Le Fee. He was asked about Tommy Watson. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a second, but it's a problem we didn't want, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I was kind of in agreement with you when he went down. You thought, might have just been one of them impact blows, you know what I mean? Like maybe a dead leg or whatever. I thought, And then when they said, it's his hamstring, I thought on Saturday, to be honest, when Regis said it's a CM1, it's a CM injury, I think it's obviously the same thing he's done in it, and he's just thought instead of, trying to play on or anything like that, make it worse, he thought just come off. But it's a body problem. I'm so good for him as well, because obviously he's missed a long period of the season anyway. He's obviously replaced Jack Clark in our team as our first choice left winger, and the fact he's probably missed more games than he's played now, it's really gutting for him. He scored some lovely goals for us this season, hasn't he? The equaliser against Preston was outstanding. The one down Luton was outstanding. He's a cracking player, and hopefully they can do something where he doesn't have this again, because obviously he's a young winger, he's fast, and everything like that, and if his hamstrings go in every so often, then it bodes badly for him. So fingers crossed to find the problem anyway, and he can get back to doing what he does best. But yeah, I'm gutted for him, I must admit.
Yeah, that thing around hamstrings, Johnny. Nick Barnes actually brought it up and said there was a piece over the weekend in the Sunday Times around how Brentford are actually investing in the medical department now, looking specifically at research into hamstring problems, because this is such an issue. And Le Bris said, well, basically these days, wingers are basically sprinters because they run so much. It's not like the old days when your creative outlet was either out on the left and the right, and they maybe got away with doing a little bit less than the rest of the team because ultimately you were looking at them to produce a bit of magic. Now they're basically bombing up and down, not just doing the attacking work, but doing the defensive work. And that would probably explain the reason, why we've had so many hamstring problems this year, and why it not just at Sunderland, but through the game in general, there's so many of them. And as Ant says, the important thing now is we have to, Romaine Mundle has to be the priority in terms of his fitness long term. It's not about can we get him back for a handful of games. If we can, brilliant. But at the same time, we need him for next season. We need him to be, as a young player, having your progress stunted by injury is probably the most frustrating thing, because if he'd stayed fit this season, I reckon we'd be talking about a player who's probably on 10 goals and 15 assists at this point, and he hasn't been, because of injury issues. It's a big frustration for everybody, isn't it?
It is, and I think that stuff about Brentford, investing so heavily in kind of researching that specific area of the medical team and looking at those injuries specifically, I think that's something that we definitely should be looking to emulate as soon as possible, really, because we've seen it, as you say, we've seen it with players this season, and we've seen it with players, going back, 2 or 3 seasons now, really, because we sign such young players. They don't necessarily have that history of men's football to look at to gauge how durable they are, how reliable they are, and how fit they are. And we've had players, not just hamstring issues as well, mind, but we've had players like, Dennis Serkin, as we know, struggles with injuries on and off. We've had the likes of Niall Huggins, who's, a bit of a special case because he's had a lot of particularly bad injuries, but Adji Elise is another one as well. So for 2 reasons we need to look into it, I think. One is to protect the players and try and keep your best players on the pitch as much as possible, because I totally agree that if Mundle had played, near enough every game this season, I think you're looking at somebody who'd be being widely celebrated as one of the best players in the league. But also because with our model of recruitment, you are naturally taking a little bit of a gamble on a lot of these players, just because you don't have that data to fall back on. So we need to find a way of as reliably as possible working out when it's the player that's the problem and when it's something we can control, if that makes sense. Because some players are just naturally prone to it. So if we can try and get as much information on that as we can, then you can start protecting players a lot more easily. It'll become a lot more obvious when they might need a rest, pulling out the team, tailoring the training plans and all that sort of sports science stuff that goes on in the background. Like, that could be massive for us in terms of trying to develop our players and improve the team, because, again, you just need to look at Mundle this season for a perfect example of when it can really hurt you, because I think we'd be a lot closer to the top 2 if he'd been fit.
Yeah. And then naturally, Ant, you look around and see, well, what the other options are. My Ender got the chance on Saturday to come in, but the questions in the press conference were specifically about Enzo Le Fee and Tommy Watson. And when he was asked about Le Fee, he's basically asked, where does he fit in? Because ideally, when we signed him, we were talking about this lad playing as a number 10, playing in the centre of the park and dictating play. And he's kind of tagged in and out with Mundle ever since he arrived. While one's went down with an injury, the other one's come back in, and it's happened again here. And when he was asked about Le Fee, he said, we have to protect Enzo and introduce him gradually. We still have 6 games left, so many opportunities to test different options. and he talked about the core of the group still being small, but we're in a good place. I mean, I think that's probably where he will land eventually as the season ends off, and it's a bit frustrating for him and for the manager because he probably wants to get the best out of him, and that'll mean using him through the middle. But interesting that he's talking about taking his time with Le Fee, isn't it? Because there will be a hunger to see him a bit sooner now that Mundle's injured.
Yeah, definitely. But I actually agree with that because the last thing we want Le Fee to get, a recurrence of his injury and then he's out for the rest of the season. Then we have got a massive problem then without Mundle and Le Fee. So I actually agree with that. I think he's spot on. I think it's kind of going back to what we were talking a few weeks ago about treating this as a mini pre-season, as in, I know we're only 8 points off the top two, but that's probably, a very unlikely thing to happen that we can push for that. And it's just about bringing these players back, nice and slowly. Like I say, with the Fee, bring them, even if they start them, 2 or 3 games before the playoff semi-finals, that's fine for me. I think it was quite telling, though, Gav. I know he mentioned that, we might have to put him on the left-hand side. But what was quite telling that when he came on Saturday, they brought him and played him in the 10, didn't they? And I think it was Chris Rigg, wasn't he? He ended up going out wide. So it might be a thing where they're thinking of, if Mayenda can do a job out on the left, then that's Mayenda's position until the end of the season, until we can get Mundle back. I'm not sure. It just does open up that question again, isn't it, about Tommy Watson? Do we just say now, well, it's a ways to an end and just play him and see what he's like. But I think for now, I'm happy with Elijah Mayenda being there.
Yeah, well, the impression at least I got when he was asked about Watson last week was he was pissed off with him and that he was annoyed by the timing of the decision for this to be brought out, that he was going to Brighton. But he seems to have changed his tone a little bit because in the press conference, he was specifically asked Jonny about Tommy Watson and whether he was in his thoughts, and he said absolutely, and that the reason he didn't play at the weekend was just a choice in the game. He said he's available, he's motivated to be promoted at the end of the season with Sunderland. The manager said he's got no worries about using Tommy Watson when considering him for selection as a left or a right winger, which was interesting as well. He specifically said the right and the left. So, I mean, we did debate on this when we spoke to Phil Smith at the weekend, and he was very much of the mind that we should use Watson and that if he's there, he should be, treated just the same as any other player, particularly now that we don't have Romaine Mundle available. Do you think he starts at Carrow Road? Because I've got a sneaky feeling, based on not just what his answer to this was, but some of the other questions he was asked. Because it's the first time I've really heard him talk in depth about rotation. It feels to me that we're going to see a few changes at Carrow Road. I might be wrong, but it does feel that way. And do you think he might start? Because it's a possibility now.
Yeah, if you'd asked us before this press conference if there was any chance of Watson starting at Carrow Road, I'd have said absolutely not. But you're right, I think Le Bris has really walked back on those comments that he made previously about Watson, and, it seems like it's a case of kind of needs must. It's forced his hand a little bit to accept that, okay, we might not be happy about him going or the timing or whatever's happened behind the scenes, but now that Mundle's potentially out for the rest of the season, all of a sudden you do have to look at it with fresh eyes and go, actually, it might be better not to run Mayenda into the ground and have to start him every game and Paddy Roberts on the other side as well. And so maybe for the good of the group, it will be the case that Watson gets more football between now and the end of the season than any of us would have kind of predicted or maybe wanted following the news breaking about the Brighton move. So, I think as well, you're right to point out his comments on rotation being something else that's a little bit kind of out of the ordinary for him. I think Watson's got a good chance of being involved from the start, and I imagine the back four will see a fair bit of rotation as well, just because of the, Trey Hume carrying that injury, however serious, from the Northern Ireland international duty, and stuff like that. So I reckon we'll see probably some square pegs in round holes as well between now and the end of the season, just while we try and kind of spread the minutes out to get everyone up to speed. But I'm not sure whether I expect Tommy Watson to be starting at Wembley if we get there. But certainly between now and then, I think you'll see more football than we would have thought, yeah.
Yeah, and when he moved on to the chat about Norwich, you mentioned Paddy Roberts there. He was specifically asked if he'll be rested, and he said, "We will wait and see," but he smiled and laughed, which I think it's not a great poker face, Regis, is it? I think we're probably going to see Paddy Roberts drop out, which is fine because this is something he's done quite a bit this season, and he's give Roberts a rest as and when, particularly when we've played 3 games in a week. He tends to drop him for the midweek game just to give him a bit of a break. And when he was talking about Watson being available for selection on the left or the right, that makes me think, well, could we see Watson come in on the left, Mayenda move over to the right-hand side, and Roberts get a rest, and potentially a couple of other players getting a rest? I mean, it did feel like to me that he was seriously considering rotation for this game. Because we play again Saturday, we've just played, and it was a grueling game at West Brom. We it was backs to the wall, everybody putting their bodies on the line. We basically just ran for 90 minutes. There was very little of us putting our foot on the ball and getting possession and slowing things down. It was more about, working very, very hard without the ball. So that will have taken its toll, wouldn't it? And now we've got to go to another away ground against another team in Norwich who like to keep the ball. So I think rotation's probably going to be the aim of the game at Carrow Road.
Yeah, definitely. And to be fair, you would agree with it, wouldn't you? Considering obviously where we are on the table, guaranteed the playoffs, guaranteed probably 4th position. I don't see a problem with that, and I think what us as fans need to kind of realise that, we're not going to win every game from now until the end of the season. It's impossible, and especially when these 3 games are coming so quickly. Swansea's going to be another one on Saturday. They're another side who, do like to keep the ball on and base themselves on possession. So it's what you don't want now is see on tomorrow night when we've got Norwich, a couple of more players go down with a muscle injury. That's not what we need at all at the minute because the squad's so thin. So I'm more than happy with whatever team he puts out. I'll support. I'm more than happy with moving people around. I think probably Alan Brown will probably get moved back into midfield. Got Leo Helder to come in, who's got that record of never lost when he's been on the pitch, have we? So they're there for a reason, Gav. You know what I mean? And we're going to need all of them from now until the end of the season. So why not give them games? I think it's basically a good source of man management and game management from Reggie, to be honest.
And obviously we've been chatting about this off air and privately, but we've been made aware of potentially another injury. I don't want to name any names because it didn't get brought up in the press conference. I was hoping that it would, but we think there's another player going to be missing tomorrow, at least rested for this game, because they're carrying a knock just to keep them fresh for the remaining games. So that might come out in the press conference, the bit where the papers speak to the manager. But when we talk about Alan Brown moving into midfield, that's probably to replace somebody just for this game. That's about as much as I'm going to say on that.
just think about who went down injured, everyone, on Saturday.
Yeah,
you might be able to get a guess.
Yeah, we don't want to give too much away just for that reason. So we'll see what happens. But there's definitely going to be rotation about the park. But we talk about Brown maybe moving into midfield. To me that'll mean Hume going back to right back, Helder coming in at left back. We're probably looking at 4 or 5 changes, maybe more.
Just to come in on that, mate. Milan Alexic again. This is a perfect game to play him. It's a one where the pressure's not really on. Yes, we want to win every game and all that, but give the lad some minutes. Reggie said I know what he said about his head's not there or whatever, but this is a perfect opportunity. Go out there, see what you can do, and show us. I think it's a perfect game for him.
Yeah, I've been impressed by Milan Alexic virtually every time I've seen him. But it's got a touch of the Jewies about it, this one, because I used to say the same about Bennett. I used to think, well, he looks pretty good. Why are we not using him more? And he just never got the chance. I hope that they do use him a bit more, because I think you can tell when you've got a player and when you haven't. Like after a couple of games, if someone's shit or not. And he's not shit. He's clearly a good player. So there's opportunity there. And, somebody who can maybe play down that left-hand side, can come in as an 8, can play virtually anywhere along that sort of attacking line in midfield. So I wouldn't be adverse to seeing a bit more Milan Alexic. I think this would be a good game to potentially bring him in for. And when he was talking about Norwich, Johnny, he was basically saying most of the same things that we laugh about whenever he talks about the opposition team. He didn't call them organised, which is interesting. Normally, that's our big laughing point, isn't it? Whether it's,
yeah, they must be chaotic for him not to have called them organised.
But he said they're a good team with many threats. They're strong in possession. They've got a good variety in the style of play, and we will have to manage a tough game. He said we will have to build momentum, so every game, no matter what lineup we have, we want to be consistent. Progress is not linear, but at West Brom we showed strong consistency out of possession, especially. So, yeah, he's very complimentary of Norwich and their style. I think we know what we're up against. I mean, I've not seen enough of Norwich to know or base this on anything in particular, but when you see they've got 2 of the 3 highest goal scorers in the league in their team, and I think that on the league's highest goal scorers, I might be wrong in that, but Norwich, they can score goals basically. So there's obviously some imbalance between their front line and the midfield, and that's where we've got to watch out. I mean, that was probably a good dress rehearsal Saturday for this, then, isn't it? Because we showed we can defend and we can be organised, and that'll give everybody in the team, not just the defenders, encouragement and motivation, because they got through a tough game and kept a clean sheet. But Norwich have got threats. They've got Josh Sargent and Borja Sainz in particular, who are, like I say, 2 of the league's leading goal scorers. In terms of the setup, and based on what we heard from Le Bris today, and we've discussed the rotation and stuff, do you reckon it'll just be one of them again where we go away from home, sit back and try and break against some counter press?
I expect so. I think if you read between the lines a little bit of what he said as well, he's talking about wanting consistency no matter the team. He's talking about, wanting to build momentum and stuff. I think what he's wanting more than anything from tomorrow night is for whatever the 11 is, we need to play in the same way. We need to hold the shape in the same way and, frustrate them in the same way as we did to West Brom. Because it's no good setting up a style of play and being organised and being good defensively if, as soon as, a couple of changes are made, it all drops to bits and you start leaving gaps in behind and what have you. So I think he'll just be looking at it and kind of, trying to... He'll want to see that he can name another team that can do the same things, because if it gets to the playoff semi-final or the playoff final and somebody goes down injured, you need to be able to trust everyone who needs to come in as the next cab off the rank to be able to do the same job. So I think he'll think now that he's been with this squad long enough that he should be able to just name any 11 and get the same style of performance. So I think he'll be looking at that more than anything. I think that it will be basically the same as the West Brom game in terms of how we set up and everything like that. I don't expect us to, we're not going to suddenly rock up and play 2 up front like we did around the turn of the year. So yeah, I'd be hoping for and expecting more of the same. And at this point, I'm just hoping that the players can still, get themselves up for it and put in a good performance, despite the fact that, like Ant was saying before, pretty much nailed on for 4th, aren't we? So need to motivate ourselves in other ways. So I'm hoping they're up for it. But yeah, I think more of the same.
Yeah, and he was talking about his hopes for the remaining games, and basic answer was consistency. He just wants to see more of the same, repetition in what we do, wins, clean sheets, going into the playoffs or going into the end. He didn't specifically say the playoffs, but going into the end of the season with a positive mindset and motivation to keep it going. But obviously a big feature of this press conference was the managing of minutes, rotation, bringing players in and out. So I think it's safe to say we're going to see a few changes at Norwich. Moving away from the press conference, I thought I'd talk about this because we haven't had a chance to chat about it yet. I think maybe Martin brought it up vaguely on Sunday, but Tony Mowbray after the game at the weekend, he was speaking about Sunderland, and I said this to you off air, Johnny. He's a big fan of talking about the opposition, isn't he, Tony Mowbray? I used to get annoyed by that when he was our manager. But in a chat with, I think, the Northern Echo, Tony Mowbray said, some of the players we brought in gelled together but didn't really become part of the group we had. There were some who might sulk and moan. I sit here today and I look at Sunderland's team week after week, there is a real consistency of selection. And yet some of the players who, and I wouldn't say I was forced to play, but I was encouraged to play, are no longer at the club. Now, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, Ant, to work out who he's talking about. I mean, Adil Oshisha's gone, Timothy Pembele is gone, Abdullah Bar's gone. I mean, that core of French lads, basically, who were there. There's also Nazari Rusin, Hamia, possibly Eliza Mayenda. I don't know how much he actually played under Tony Mowbray. But, yeah, I mean, it's not difficult, is it, to work out who he's chatting about there? Do you think he's got a point or not?
Do you know what? You know what he says? I'm not name names. It just might as well have mentioned them. Because he got like every single clue bar that one. It was like one of them really easy questions you get in like a Christmas cracker. It was, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you could possibly tell that when, our Sheesh used to go like missing in for the squad for long time. It wasn't long periods of time where our Sheesh wasn't even on the bench, or Barm and Pembele failed badly, didn't he, when he was here? But
Pierre Ekwa as well, another one, by the way. I didn't mention him either. Ekwa.
Who, sorry?
Pierre Ekwa.
Yeah, and Misha as well, the lad who was on loan. I highly doubt he's talking about Mamad Diallo. So, I think he's probably got a point. When you've got, the bother is when you have got, a group where a lot of them were French or any nationality, they are going to hang around with each other, aren't they? They were young, around about the same age, probably had the same interests or whatever. They are probably going to hang around, and when one isn't playing, the others might sulk. I always remember when, I think it was last season when we'd lost a game at home. I think Barr had been on the bench and didn't get on, and I think Christian Speakman was talking to him after the game, like putting a hand on his back, and Barr wasn't very happy, and it seemed a bit weird that. I kind of. It's probably happened. That's why they've all, they all are not here anymore. Our Sheesh is out on loan, and Ekwa's out on loan, and as in Bar and stuff like that. And you're probably seeing at the end of the season, they're probably the ones who are going to be leaving the club. So fair play. You know what I mean? The last thing you want in a club is a clique that are, a little bit, they're not there for the team. So it is what it is. But I liked what Mowbray said about that, because I think we were probably all thinking that anyway. So fair play to him for confirming it. It's better than his last conference when he was West Brom manager against us, when he was proper bitter. And he was like, we'll score more goals, we'll get more points in Sunderland, and we went up. So fair play to him.
Just because you mentioned it, after he said that, I always thought he was an arsehole.
I
did. I remember him saying that and being really annoyed about it, because he did. We beat them, and then he come out and said, we'll finish above them. And it was a bit like, I don't know if he was just because he was a young manager at the time and, maybe didn't understand that you shouldn't say certain things in the media and things like that. But I don't know, I did. I always thought he was a dick for years after that. And then when he, even up to the point he took the job from us, I was like, well, I thought he hated Sunderland.
Yeah, that was my downside to him not coming in that press conference. I didn't give a shit what he did for he did a really good job everywhere he went, didn't he? And because of that press conference, I didn't fancy him.
Couple of other bits before we round off. I thought this is worth mentioning, and I've talked about them a little bit over the weekend on the pods, but I'll grab your thoughts. Saturday was Anthony Patton's 50th clean sheet as a Sunderland first-team goalkeeper. I checked, he's played 158 games, so that's virtually 1 in 3 games. Just quickly on Patterson, Johnny, I mentioned him at the weekend. Like I say, I think he was a lot better at the weekend, played decent, did nothing wrong really. He was part of that defensive unit which did keep the clean sheet and was pretty resilient. But that is some achievement, isn't it, for a goalkeeper to get 50 clean sheets at Sunderland? Because for most of my life, we've been shite. He's been pretty lucky to play in teams that win most weeks. So, but still some achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good going. And I think the international break probably came at a good time for him as well, because he was under quite a lot of pressure a few weeks ago. And in some ways, kind of deservedly so, because I think there was 3 games off the belt where he basically cost us a goal in each game. I'm thinking, Hull at home, where he let that, that mix up with him and Patrick Roberts, the corner, he lets it through his hands. Around that time, he was really going through it. So I'm pleased to see that he's kind of bounced back a little bit. And I take your point that he played all right, but wasn't, he wasn't spectacular at the weekend, was he?
No, he did his job.
Did his job.
Roy Keane, yeah,
exactly. he just did his job. But no, I think it's good to see, because it's difficult as a keeper. I think you can't go out and make stuff happen for you to have to save to make yourself look good when you're in bad form. If you're an outfielder, you can kind of go looking for stuff. So I'm pleased for him that he's had these couple of games come right on the heels of his really sticky patch, so it can kind of just settle his nerves, make him feel a bit, he's kind of reset probably mentally a bit, going into the final games of the season, going into the playoffs. The last thing you want is question marks hanging over your keeper. Just look at Leeds. They don't look very happy with their situation. So if we can avoid that and get Patterson a few more clean sheets between now and the end of the season, I'll be really happy. And I think it's a great achievement for him as well. 50 clean sheets is no mean feat. It shows that we've generally been a pretty good side when he's been playing. because you don't tend to keep clean sheets if you're getting beat, do you? And like you say, basically 1 in 3. I think that's pretty good going, and it's nice to see whenever an academy player graduates into the first team and starts doing well. I think we all love to see it, don't we? So, long may it continue for me.
Yeah. Other little bit, and I'm going to grab your opinion on this. Jayden Danns has been pictured in Liverpool training gear on Twitter. I think the Liverpool Academy Twitter page posted a bunch of photos, and he was just hanging around in the background. And that did cause a bit of a storm among Sunderland fans on social media, because it's not really been explained. They haven't done a very good job, Sunderland, of explaining what's going on with him. Me and Jonny, after the last press conference, were talking about things which we would like them to talk about, and this was one of them. Like, what is the situation with him? We were sort of fed out through the media that the club were expecting him to be fit at some point. But to me, it's almost as though we aren't going to see him. Like, it's a weird one, isn't it?
The only thing I can kind of relate it to was, when we had Broadhead a couple of years ago, and Broadhead did his hamstring against Arsenal, I think, in the Cup. And Broadhead went back to Everton and got fixed up by Everton. And he was pictured a couple of times in the Everton training gear. I remember something going around then. And then was like, why is he not coming back? So I'm not really all that worried about that, because we knew he was coming back at some point, because we knew that it was actually said, he's going away at Everton. He's going to get, I think it said the benefit of their medical expertise or something or other like that. And I'm fine with that with Liverpool if they're saying, we'll look after him, we'll send him back to you when he's good and ready. The problem is it's never been explained to us how long his injury was going to be. Which you could say, well, if they knew it was going to be a long-term injury, we would just cancel the loan. But obviously that hasn't happened. I just don't know. I don't know. It's written in the stars where he's going to pop on in the playoff final and score them a goal, isn't it? That's probably what it's going to be. But it is a strange situation. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And we could do with him now, couldn't we? You know what I mean? With Isidore not hitting that form and all that, and we could do with an extra striker, but we're not going to see it, are we? It's strange.
And the fact that, Abdullahi's been injured seemingly for ages now. Treog and Suyi's been injured for a little bit.
Yeah, there's only that. The other lad, is it Finn Gargantuan or Gargantuan, whatever he's called? I mean, he looks unbelievable in man, I must admit. But it's far too soon for him.
I like that nickname there of Finn Gargantuan. That's brilliant. I love that.
Well, he is huge as well. Honestly, if you've seen him I've watched him in 21s. He's massive. He's only 16 as well. He's he's about 6'12" or something. He's absolutely huge.
Well, there's a nice segue for us, and thanks for that. The under-21s are playing tonight at Eppleton. They've got a game against Spurs. Treog Suyi and Timur Tutierov aren't expected back until the Friday night game against Aston Villa. And the club aren't streaming it tonight because the Saudis are on Sky, and because of Premier League broadcasting rules, that means they can't broadcast Premier League 2 games at the same time, which is just ridiculous, isn't it? So because Newcastle are on Sky tonight, we can't watch our under-21s play against Spurs at Eppleton on YouTube. So if you want to watch that game, you've got to be there in person. I believe your season card gets in for free.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
If not, you can buy tickets on the club ticket website. It is there. I've looked this morning. So yeah, that may be a chance to see Mr. Gargantuan in action if you fancy it.
Amongst others.
Yeah, I would imagine it's going to be a very young team, because a lot of those players will be travelling with the squad to Norwich. So it'll probably be, as it has been for a few weeks now, it'll probably be a team largely made up of under-18s. But yeah, if you want to get along and see the next future star of Sunderland, you might want to go and take that game in against Spurs tonight. Like I say, they're also playing Aston Villa on Friday, and I think that's the last game of the season for the 21s. So yeah, not many opportunities left this season to watch them at Eppleton. Other bits and bobs. I mean, do we want to talk about this? Ross Stewart made his Southampton return, I noticed yesterday. The only reason I bring this up is because it's the fact he's just barely kicked the ball, has he? I think someone totted it up. He's played about 160 minutes since he signed for them, but he did make his return off the bench for Southampton and got relegated. So,
some bloody expensive minutes, those, aren't they?
They are and all. And I mean, I really don't wish anything bad against Ross Stewart. I think when you consider the fact he was signed injured and he's not really been fit since, that he would have been a fool not to take a big contract. The club would have been encouraging him, going, they're going to sign you while you're injured, get yourself away. you can make money, it'll change your life. Yeah, because his career was played in Scotland in the early days, and he won't have made any money from it. So nice to see him back anyways. And the only other thing of note, which I noticed on the news site, and it's not really worth talking about, but I'm going to anyways, because I've got it written down, James Vaughan's left his role as something to do with the academy at Everton. And there's a name I hadn't heard in a while. I was like, friggin' hell, James Vaughan.
It's a blast from the past.
And that's right.
Hope he didn't cut his ears on the way out, like.
I was going to say, after scoring against Burton Albion, couple years to the end.
But seeing James Vaughan in a role like that's the same feeling I got seeing Rudy Gestede as the whatever he is the other day. I feel like I'm living in my Football Manager save.
Do you know what I liked about that Rudy Gestede interview? He was wearing like a off the rail Asda George suit. It was like really ill fit. He looked like a door-to-door salesman, you know, like he looked like a bag of shit.
And not a very good one at that.
Yeah, much more confident in a tracksuit than a suit. I think you can safely say with him.
Yeah. It just screamed amateur. It was like watching us in League One with Richard Hill in charge of recruitment and Tony Corton, like. Just looked like shit. Anyways, we have literally scraped the bottom of the barrel with that story, so we'll not go on too much longer. Thank you very much if you've lasted 35 minutes again with us. We are basically a daily podcast now. I think I'm ready to say that because I think I looked the other day, we've been going a month and we've done 30 episodes. So you can virtually depend upon us to be available every single day. There's already another pod out on the feed today, the Norwich preview, which Chris did, recorded over the weekend, with Canaries superfan David Thornhill. I thought it was a really interesting chat because this isn't a podcaster or a journalist or anything, just a normal fan like the rest of us who speaks like a fan, who's got some really interesting stories about past games between Sunderland and Norwich down the years, talking about when he went to the 85 Milk Cup final when he was a kid. He's also, has been in his time a referee, and I think he said on 4 occasions he's been asked to step in as a 4th official whilst at games, one of which he went viral for in 2017. It was a Norwich game. So he talks about all that with us. It's a really, really interesting chat, and they also preview the game, so make sure you catch up on that. We've also got 2 pods out from after the game. There's the reaction pod, which was recorded at full time with me and Chris. If you missed that, the West Brom one, make sure you listen to that. And also we were joined on Sunday by Phil Smith of the Sunderland Echo, who gave us a little bit more insight into what happened on the day at the Hawthorns, his chats with Regis Le Bris after the game and all the rest of it. So 2 really interesting pods there for you, and also a month's worth of stuff if you want to get caught up. I mean, there's loads and loads of stuff. So thank you for joining us. We've got a reaction pod at full time after the Norwich game. That'll be me, Craig Chapman, and Bomber will be back for that one. And then the following day, we've got Jeff Brown of BBC Look North joining us. So lots of good stuff coming up. And then obviously going into Swansea, we've got all the bits and bobs around that. So plenty of podcasts coming out where he is. You will not be short of podcasts when it comes to Rotor Report and how the podcast. So thank you very much, Johnny. Been great, mate. Appreciate your time.
Very much, Gav.
Cheers, Anne. Thank you, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks for listeners. Like I say, we will be back after Norwich. We'll see you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.